I got a cup of coffee, though. I'm feeling strong, man. I'm feeling good.
Are you? You ready to lash out at the world and scream it from the hilltops?
Let's not get too ambitious. Let's, let's start with I'm ready to remain conscious as we record this show.
There you go.
Quite
Okay.
frankly, Mark, that's more than you've been able to ask of me sometimes. So
that's a good point. Every time you hear a thump, it's me kicking Chris to wake him up.
Yeah. And you'll notice all of a sudden I start talking faster at that point. It actually does remind me of a story of Mark and I back in our glory days of working together.
Yep.
Which was a lot of fun. I do miss those times.
It was a simpler time.
Yeah. We were called into a nearby city, and by nearby city I mean Portland, to cover for a standby unit. One of our crews was out there covering an event, which we often do in case someone gets injured at like a football game or what have you. And we were heading out over, and they didn't need us after all. So we turned back around. I was tired. And I'm not going to say that I was sleeping on the clock, but I was sleeping on the clock. Ah, crap, I said it. But I was out. Like, I passed out. Mark was driving, so that I should clear that part up. I was the passenger. But I was out. Next thing I remember, waking up on scene of a call. And Mark being like, get out of the truck. I'm like, okay. And then we go on. And the best thing is, I woke up with the map book in my lap.
Right.
So we hop back in, and I'm talking to Mark. I'm like, thanks for putting the map book in my lap so I at least feel like I did something. Because from my perception, Mark grabbed the map book, mapped himself in, threw it in my lap, and then we went in there. What had actually happened is, even though from my perception I was asleep, I woke up, mapped the call, fell back asleep. Because Mark's like, no, dude, you mapped the call.
you got us there, so...
Yeah, exactly. So next time you call 911... just, consider who's going to show up.
Exactly. Think very deeply about how badly you want people to come help you.
Yeah. So. But speaking of sleep.
Sleep?
Long time ago, they used to use opiates as a sleep aid. Well, they still
why do you bring that up, Chris?
Well, I think we're going to talk about opiates today.
What makes you think that?
I don't know. Could be because it's on the top of the prep list here. But,
So I guess this is probably where we start going, hey, welcome to Medical Stuff. My name is Mark. I know what Morpheus now means, Frankham. And that's Chris. I just know I like morphine, Fingston.
Yeah, I do like morphine. I'm just kidding. I don't abuse morphine, although treating my acute pain, I do. And by the way...
It's never cute.
No, it's not. Acute pain is not cute.
No, it's not.
Yeah, it's very unfun. But yeah, we're going to be talking about opiates today. And so
Opiates or opioids?
Both.
Opioids or opioids?
Yeah, well, opioids.
Opioids.
Opioids?
Look at the spelling.
Like hemorrhoid? Well, yeah, but the spelling is odd. Opioids.
I think you misspelled it.
No, I didn't. Because I tried to spell it the other way and it told me it was wrong, and I Googled it. Sure as shit, I was wrong. There's an extra I in there, and you're like, holy crap.
So I guess when you say there's no I in opioids, you're absolutely wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. There's two of them.
Yeah, opioids.
Yeah, so now you've probably heard opioids, you've probably heard opiates, and we've recently done some street drugs episodes where we've talked about various opioids and opiates, but because these drugs have such a rich history in the world culture, dating back as far as we have found. I mean, ancient Macedonians were using this.
Macedonians?
Macedonians?
Opioid?
The opium poppy. Anyway, first I guess I'll clarify some terminology. As you've heard, Mark and I already struggle a little bit with the terminology.
Whoa, hey. I'm solid. If there's struggling going on, it's on that side of the microphone.
I just have no confidence now. I started out good. So opiates and opioids. An opiate is any drug that is derived directly from the opium poppy plant that also acts on opioid receptors in your brain.
Like Demerol.
Or morphine.
Right.
Or codeine.
Right. Opium.
Opium, exactly, which is the original, I guess you could say, of all of them.
The OG, or the OP. Original poppy.
I guess I was going to say, or the OO.
Right.
Original opium. Or opioid. But anyway, opioids covers those and synthetic drugs that also act on the same opiate receptors.
Such as fentanyl.
Exactly.
Or Dilaudid.
Methadone, which we'll talk about as well.
All my homies.
Yeah, exactly. Was that Kid Rock, All My Homies in the Methadone Clinic?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Wow. That's a good one, Frankham.
I try.
Yeah, I mean, you had a music reference that's newer than 1970s, so that's good for you, man. Anywho, so let's talk about history. So it comes from a plant, and the actual name of that plant is the Papaver somniferum.
Or a poppy.
Yeah, let's go with the poppy plant instead.
Which is fun because for Remembrance Day in Canada and in England, everybody wears a poppy plant on their lapel.
Oh, wow.
And we had Poppy Day.
Nice. That's right. I keep forgetting you're Canadian. Mm-hmm. Then every now and then I see you write with your left hand. I'm like, yes.
There it is.
There's the Canadian.
The defining characteristic of a Canadian.
But fun story, somniferum actually means to sleep. It's a Latin word that means to sleep. And we'll talk about morphine a little bit later, but that is derived from the word Morpheus, which I believe is the Greek god of sleep.
It is.
Yeah.
Which, once I learned that, blew my mind because of The Matrix.
Yeah, well, I knew that way early in life because my dad told me. My dad was a paramedic, for those who haven't heard the podcast with him. Mm-hmm. So I probably knew a lot of things as a child that other children did not know. Mm-mm. Yeah.
Yeah. My daughter scarred her tremendously through my stories of work.
Oh, I know. And my dad ruined movies for me because I've known for a long, long time.
You don't shock a Cecily.
You don't shock a flatline. You don't shock it.
You're not jump-started. Anyway, we're not going to go down that rabbit hole right now.
Yeah, seriously. But no, the opioid poppy plant has been harvested for this use forever, for as long as recorded history can go back.
Time immemorial.
Oh, ancient Minoans, ancient Greeks, they all have artwork or literature indicating its use. The most basic drug form of this is opium. Basically, they make that by taking the seed pod, and they actually just slice the seed pod and they squeeze out the sap. The sap is just left out in the sun to dry, and then you can either ingest the dried sap or smoke it. You can do either of those, and that's how you get the effects of the opium plant. Mm-hmm. The effect is felt within minutes. Yeah. The dangers of addiction and overdose, though, were also recognized centuries ago as well. In fact, the opium wars of the early 1800s, early to mid 1800s, was when the British and French were actually trying to smuggle opium and poppy plants themselves into China. The British actually owned large portions of India at that point.
Well, back in that time, you also had opium dens.
Yeah.
You had very respectable places that you could, and non-respectable places, depending on how much money you had, where you could go and smoke opium and lay in a bed and just trip. In fact, I'm sure they have another place, but here in Portland, have you ever been to the Shanghai tunnels?
I have not.
Yeah, this is a kind of a cool thing to go to.
For being a local, I probably should.
Yeah, it's kind of a cool thing. So there's stories about how they used to Shanghai people to work on ships. Mm-hmm. And they actually have like a drop floor underneath a bar. But one of the things they show you is that this was also an opium den at one point, and there's a little area that they've excavated that was an actual opium den.
Wow.
Back in the 1800s, you go down there and smoke opium, and they have the beds in there, and yeah.
Yeah, that's the way to go.
Yeah, if you get a chance to do the Shanghai tunnel, it's kind of a fun little thing to do.
I think I'll try that.
Yeah. Take the kids. It's ghost stories and everything. Take the kids.
Oh, there you go. Oh, Emmett loves ghost stories. For his 3rd birthday, we actually used my brother-in-law's barn, and all the adults hung around with monster masks, and he went monster hunting.
Oh, wow.
He loves to be scared.
Oh, wow.
Both the kids do.
Down here, though, you can, you'll be standing there, and you can all of a sudden smell perfume.
Really?
Yeah. Ooh. It's kind of cool. Not every single time. And they tell some good stories.
Gotcha. There's probably some guy behind a curtain spraying perfume before you walk there.
Hey, don't ruin it for me.
Hey, what? Okay, I'm sorry. It's legitimate ghost, Mark. Anyway, back as on track as we'll ever be. Right. Anyway, I was about to say back on track, but I figured I was shooting for the moon.
Yeah.
So basically, opium consists of 2 compounds that get the user high, and that's going to be morphine and codeine. Those are the 2 compounds that opium can be broken down into. Morphine was isolated and sold in the early 1800s in various forms. It wasn't until later that codeine was isolated early on, but it wasn't commercially viable for a while. But back to morphine, though. In the late 1800s, Bayer accidentally created diamorphine in an attempt to isolate codeine from the opium.
Wow.
The codeine was actually well sought after because it had been isolated before, and they knew that it was less addictive than morphine. It wasn't as powerful, but could be used to treat the same things. As I'd already mentioned, the addictive effects and the downsides to opium have been known for a long, long time.
So this thing that Bayer accidentally created, it's heroin?
Yes. They actually ended up creating heroin instead, which is not weaker than morphine, but 2 to 3 times stronger than morphine.
So yes, you got much more of and they would use, we talked about this in the last episode, they would use this as like a sleep aid and an expectorant.
And here's the best part about it. Bayer actually advertised it as a non-addictive alternative to morphine.
Right.
Because what they were trying to do, though, what the goal was, is they would say it was non-addictive because you could use half to a third the dose.
Right.
And that was the goal. Unfortunately,
you're getting more of a dose because it was stronger.
People just didn't do that.
Right.
You know, and it ended up being very addictive. And it didn't last long. It was pretty much primarily commercially sold 1898 to 1910.
Right.
And by 1912, there was legislation against it around the world.
Right.
So it was very short-lived because it was incredibly addictive. So yeah, that is basically how heroin came to be and still remains the most abused opium byproduct in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, because you don't necessarily need a big, huge lab to create it.
No, you don't. In fact, a lot of it is created on barn floors. Intentionally.
Stop looking for a bathroom and kind of walked in on it with a camera crew.
No. Intentionally. They're making it's at an actual heroin plant in Colombia or somewhere. I don't know.
Huh.
And what it is you have what looks to me like a covered horse stall, because I grew up with horses.
Right.
And they just have just tons of poppy plant byproduct on the ground. They're dumping chemical on it, and there's guys just walking around with mashers on their feet, just mashing it all together. They didn't let it sit for a few days, and bam, heroin.
Really?
Yeah. Gotta find that.
Gordon Ramsay.
Yeah.
Chef.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah. I gotta find that because I gotta figure out what the name of the show is. But yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and he actually critiques the way they're making it as like unsanitary, which cracks me up because like, no kidding.
Right. Are you trying to tell me that the heroin producers of the world are not using aseptic techniques?
On the stall floor? This is not sterile?
Exactly.
My goodness.
And they're walking around on it with masher shoes?
Someone should advise the FDA.
Exactly.
This cannot
Where's
meet
your
health
local
code.
health authority?
I'm sure their feces parts per billion is way up.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Way above the acceptable level.
So morphine is the one half, and that is what heroin is derived from. But the other half of the opium byproduct is codeine. And codeine was isolated around the same time as the morphine was, but not commercially viable until actually the early 1900s. And since the advent of codeine, many other synthetic, semi-synthetic, and natural variations of opioids have been created. So why do people take opioids in the first place?
Because they like the feeling.
Yeah, and what are those feelings?
We have reduced pain perception, hence why it's used. Well, we use fentanyl for that specific reason.
Yeah, and fentanyl being a synthetic opioid.
Right. Before fentanyl was used, it was very common to see morphine. In your hospital settings now, you're seeing a lot more use of Dilaudid.
Yeah.
Because it reduces your ability to feel pain. You know, we tell people that in the ambulance, it's probably not going to take away the pain.
Yeah.
But you're going to care about it a whole lot less.
Absolutely.
And because the second effect it has is euphoria. You're just generally happier. We were talking earlier about the kid in the last episode who we gave morphine to, we gave fentanyl to, and by the time we got to the hospital after dislocating his arm,
he's licking his shoulder.
Licking his shoulder, you know.
His parents had quite a look on their face.
Yes.
Does create a sensation of fearlessness also. Right. And it's
this is that bulletproof, I've had 4 beers, not bulletproof kind of syndrome.
Yeah. Now this actually has a little bit of a darker history behind it. So you do hear about places where there's military coups going on. And you see like child soldiers.
Oh yeah.
This is one of the ways they drive a child to battle is they actually get them high on various opiates.
Keep them high on it.
Yeah, because it gives a sense of fearlessness. I believe the way it was worded was that it removes perceived danger. And so with that...
Well, if I'm doing some research, I think it's the same thing in the sex trade. Where they get them high and they get them, addicted to this.
Right.
So they're willing to do what you want them to do because you can provide them more.
Yeah.
Then also, the situation that would normally be very scary, rightly so. Be it you're a child soldier or you're being forced into prostitution, you know, you don't perceive it as bad. It's not as bad because of the drug you're on. Yeah.
Keeps you down to it.
And then the last one is you're drowsy.
And a lot of these early opium derivatives, such as heroin and morphine getting its name from the Greek god Morpheus, were actually sold as sleep aids.
Right.
They've been used as antidepressants, not specifically, maybe specifically morphine. Yes. They've been sold as antidepressants.
Yeah, it's that euphoric feeling.
Yeah. So, and not all these are things. Now, obviously, in the medical field, we're not going to be giving it to people for fearlessness.
Right.
But these are some more medical uses for it. Like we already mentioned, analgesia or pain control.
Right.
Decreased air hunger. Now, what air hunger is typically associated with is people who are chronically short of breath. So if someone has a disease process like emphysema or congestive heart failure or lung cancer, basically diseases that are going to cause shortness of breath later in the process, morphine can be administered to help them feel less air hunger. And so you often see it used in end-of-life care for people with terminal lung disease.
Right.
We also used to use it as more of a frontline treatment in EMS for congestive heart failure as well, where the heart is failing and fluid is backing up into the lungs.
Or heart attacks.
Right. So one of the side effects of morphine is it has a vasodilation effect, where it causes the vasculature in your body to become bigger. I think Mark and I have used this analogy many times to talk about the cardiovascular system, where you have basically you have your heart, which is the pump. You have your veins and your arteries, which is the container, and your blood is the fluid. And this is how you get blood pressure, is by, the pump pumping harder, the container shrinking, will raise your blood pressure, or more fluid, or less fluid to lower it. Mm-hmm. So one of the things morphine will do is it will make the container bigger, dropping the pressure. What it can also theoretically do is if you have a clot in one of these vessels, it can make the pipe bigger to allow blood flow to get around the clot.
Right.
In the instance of congestive heart failure, where we're concerned about fluid backing up into the lungs because the pump itself has failed, we can lower the pressure of the rest of the body, which will allow some of that fluid, instead of going into the lungs, to have less resistance to go other places, and thus draw it away from the lungs.
Now, this is also a short-term fix.
Yes, absolutely.
Because the morphine's going to wear off, and you're going to be back in the same position. The problem you run into is these patients are generally very tired.
From all that work of breathing.
From all that work of breathing. So you take away that work of breathing because you've just lowered that level and they feel better. But then if you're not careful and it comes back, they're in a worse position because people can actually just get too tired to breathe.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've seen it. And when someone's too tired to breathe, that is a bad, bad sign.
Right.
That person needs intervention now or they will die.
Uh-huh.
That's where that goes. So these next two, these are not typical modern uses anymore, but it does reduce a seizure threshold. So for people who have chronic seizure conditions such as epilepsy or some encephalopathies, which is I guess would be a disease inside the head, is what that word literally means.
Usually it's a type of swelling of the brain.
Yeah,
along those kind, or fluid on the brain.
Yeah. This has been used in the past to try and lower that seizure threshold, and also as an antidepressant. Unfortunately, one of the unwanted side effects is thoughts of suicide.
Right.
So giving a drug that could have an unwanted potential side effect of thoughts of suicide to someone who's depressed, poor planning.
Right.
And we've developed better medications in the meantime for that use. Other unwanted effects are physical dependence.
Right.
Now, what this does is talk a little bit about some physiology. As we already mentioned, these opioids stimulate opioid receptors in your body. And these receptors are responsible for happiness. They're responsible for your perception of pain. The problem is that it can cause damage to these receptors. So when the drug is no longer there, you can no longer get happy. And so you start to have a physical chemical craving for what is essentially now a neurotransmitter for you, being heroin, that you must have.
Right.
And not taking it causes things like, if you've ever heard of withdrawal syndromes, it causes headaches, it causes the shakes, it can cause seizures, not having it.
Right. It can cause delirium tremens.
Yeah. These are physical problems that will happen to you if you do not continue to take the medication.
Or you're not weaned off of it in a medically sound way.
Yeah. Let's see. Other things that it causes is it can cause constipation.
It dries out your bowels.
Yeah. Well, what it does is it decreases what they just call gastric motility. And what that means is from your stomach down to all your colons, they have an effect. It's called peristalsis, where they squeeze food that you've used up all the way down to your butt. and they squeeze it out. Well, it decreases the ability of those organs to do that job. And so what happens is the food bolus, the previous food, the waste, sits in there longer. The poop. The poop sits in there longer. And one of the processes that happens in your colon is what they call fluid reuptake. This might sound kind of gross, but your body will actually sit there and take water out of your poop for use again. The problem is that when you take water out of the poop, it becomes dry and hard. If it sits there too long because you have reduced motility, it becomes a clog.
Right.
And that's how people can get severely constipated.
Well, they go from being constipated to being impacted. And
this is a problem. Have you ever been on a severely impacted patient?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It's agony. It is absolute agony, and patients will do anything
to get the morphine.
They will do anything to get morphine, but they'll also do anything to get that impaction out.
Right. Just recently, we picked up a gentleman who was wrapping paper towel around his own finger and trying to dig it out.
Well, I've got a worse story.
That's pretty bad.
Oh, okay. I see your story, and I raise you 1 spoon.
Oh.
1 wooden spoon.
Ah.
Mind you, 1 broken wooden spoon.
Ah, okay, you win.
Yeah, so this is, the impaction causes several things. It causes extreme pain. You also don't want to eat anymore, because that impaction can get so severe that it creates a sensation of fullness. So patients don't want to eat, and so their blood sugar gets lower. And we all know what low blood sugar does to your thinking and your rationale.
Probably not everybody, but it can actually cause you to have altered mental status.
Yeah.
It can be altered level of consciousness. Like you can pass out from it, but you're not thinking straight.
Exactly.
You don't have enough sugar in your brain to make coherent thought.
And so one of the things that ended up happening to this particular gentleman, he lived in a nursing home, and he wanted anything to get it out. He'd taken a wooden spoon. He had broken the end to make it look like a pointy spear tip. And he was trying to put it up there because he couldn't get the whole spoon in.
Right.
And he was trying to get it up there to dig out the impaction. A second side effect of these impactions is they can be so severe that it can actually cause what's called a vagal stimulus, which maybe that's something for another episode. But this can actually slow down your heart rate. And with your slow heart rate comes a lower blood pressure.
Well, my paramedic instructor told a story about a guy who they were convinced he was having a heart attack.
Yeah.
This was back in the mid-'80s. He was a paramedic. And this guy, he was having severe pain all over. That can be, chest pain can be mimicked in the abdominal region. So if you're having abdominal pain, we'll still probably check you out for cardiac symptoms. But his blood pressure was low. His heart rate was low because he had stimulated the vagus nerve.
Ooh.
The vagus nerve is a nerve in your chest, and you also have one in your neck that regulates heart rate and blood pressure. If you do something to increase the intrathoracic pressure, the pressure inside your chest cavity, such as bearing down to poop, having a lot of pain so you tense up because you're impacted, it increases that intrathoracic pressure, stimulating the vagus nerve to drop your heart rate and do things to cause your blood pressure to go down.
Yeah.
So say you're constipated and you're sitting on the toilet, you bear down really hard trying to push the poop out, and your body thinks, your vagus nerve thinks, oh my God, your pressure is through the roof.
Let's slow it down.
Let's slow everything down. Well, then when you release to take a breath, your blood pressure drops off severely.
And you pass out.
And you can die. A lot of elderly die this way. I've run the calls of the people dead beside the toilet.
Wow.
That's because they couldn't, as a healthy adult or healthy child or young adult, your body can respond quickly enough. But as you get older, your body doesn't respond the way it used to.
Right.
And so it drops off and it doesn't come back up.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, this is what can happen from, and there's been, back in the day, then they still do, digital impaction. They will actually, you go to the hospital and somebody will put on a glove and just start digging out poop from your butt.
Digital, by the way, means finger. This isn't like a...
Yeah, it's not like a remote control from across the room.
Yeah, no.
Yeah. So,
I mean, although the person doing it wishes it was a remote control from across the room.
But also, it can get so severe that you have to go to surgery to get this taken care of.
Yeah.
So you're going to go into a surgical suite, and they're going to have to get it out that way.
And this is why a lot of times you'll see opiate pain medications also prescribed with a laxative.
Right.
On the backside of that to help prevent this.
And they're told to drink plenty of fluid. Exactly,
because we talked about that fluid reuptake. So the narcotic can have a potential to draw excess fluid away. Let's add more fluid to the equation.
Right.
Yeah. Another side effect is going to be respiratory depression. So earlier I'd mentioned air hunger, and that just reduces your air hunger. This is what the overdose, when we talk about overdosing on this drug, this is the mechanism that kills you. It has the ability to reduce your hunger for air so much that you stop breathing an adequate amount.
When we give narcotics on the ambulance, one of the things we have to do is we have to monitor your oxygen saturation.
Right.
And it's not uncommon to see people's oxygen saturation drop off, and we have to give them supplemental oxygen. And then in certain circumstances, I know one medic who actually ended up having to breathe for the patient. They ended up having to use a bag valve mask to breathe for them because they knocked out their respiratory drive.
Oops.
Yeah. Yeah. It's going to be tough to document, but,
well,
this is a side effect. The patient wasn't in any pain.
Yeah, there you go. They didn't feel like they were suffocating.
Right.
And, of course, that can lead to death. And that's pretty much what the opioid overdose is. So, common derivatives. And by derivatives, I mean derivative of the opium, of the original, what'd you call it, the OP?
Original poppy.
Of the original poppy. So most commonly, we've already touched on this one quite a bit, but morphine. It's most commonly used for acute pain. However, it is used in some situations to treat people's chronic pain, although these days you see that far more in end-of-life care than you do for, like, a tonsillectomy.
Right.
Boy, morphine for a tonsillectomy.
Yeah, wow.
That'd be fantastic.
That's some horrible tonsillectomy.
Yeah. That's just, your ENT messed up, man.
Exactly.
Crap. Did I grab the garden shovel again to do this? Not again.
I went in there with a trowel.
Yeah.
And, so yeah, it's...
Shit, scalpel, I grabbed the knife. Damn it.
Exactly. So you want to, with the morphine, again, it's highly addictive.
Right.
And...
Physically addictive. And a lot of times with these drugs, and so let's talk a little bit about it. I want to talk brief tangent, addiction. So a lot of times you'll hear Mark and I in these episodes as we talk about drugs. There's physical addiction, and then there's psychological or social addiction. Mm-hmm. And with physical addiction, like we said, there's a physical consequence to not using the drug.
This is your person who drinks multiple caffeinated drinks every day and then stops drinking them.
Right.
And you get the headache. Everybody's had the caffeine headache.
Yeah, absolutely. But then you've also got the psychological or the social addiction, where one example of that would be you have something going in your life that may be going on in your life that maybe is unpleasant, causes you to be depressed. Mm-hmm. And so you're taking these medications as a way to escape that.
Right.
When these medications go away, your reality is real again, and there you are.
So you keep taking them, and you have to take them in higher doses to get the same effect.
Absolutely. And that's more the social psychological addiction.
Which, in these medications, will lead to a physical addiction.
Absolutely. All right. Moving on to codeine. So, codeine, that's the other half of the opium that they can isolate from. The original product. So, codeine is much less powerful than morphine. In terms of a study that has been done recently, most people... between 8 to 12% the strength of morphine in most people. But it's currently the most widespread opiate in the world. It's in everything from cough syrup to pain pills. It's been used as an antidepressant.
Oh, yeah.
So it's super, super common because of the, I guess you'd probably say perceived, at least initially, perceived reduced risk of codeine versus morphine.
Right. Well, we talked about heroin. And one of the attractions of heroin was that, and morphine, it reduces that air hunger.
Right.
And so, heroin and morphine are found to be too strong, but codeine in a cough syrup is just right.
Yeah.
Because it reduces the air hunger a little. It sedates you a little, so you're going to sleep better at night. So if you're sick and you have a constant cough, you're more likely to sleep well through the night. Mm-hmm. Now, this is also not just codeine. There's usually something else in there as a cough suppressant or an expectorant.
A lot of times you'll also see codeine mixed with Tylenol.
Yeah, that's Tylenol number 3.
Yep.
And then you also see other narcotic pain relievers mixed with Tylenol.
Absolutely.
Oxycodone, or what's it called now? They just renamed it.
MS Cotton?
No, they got a new name for it. I can't remember right now. But it's Yeah. So, you can mix these drugs with other drugs to get the desired effect. Codeine is so popular because, like I said, they want something better than morphine, so they made heroin because it had to take less to get it to work. So they figured that was better. No, not so much.
Yeah.
Codeine kind of is that medication.
Right.
It's not as strong, but it's usually strong enough. You're going to get so if you're sick and you have some bad cough, they're going to put an expectorant in there to help you cough up the phlegm. They're going to put a cough suppressant in there so you're not coughing as much. And then the codeine is going to help you sleep.
Right.
And reduce your respiratory hunger.
Now,
air hunger.
At the end of the day, though, it's still an opioid. It can still be abused.
Oh, absolutely.
And this is the classic case where we talk about dose makes the poison.
Right.
What a substance is has very little to do with how much it can harm you. Just any substance in the world in a small enough quantity is safe.
Right.
Any substance in the world in a high enough quantity is dangerous.
Milk is good for you. 50,000 gallons of milk coming towards you is bad for you.
But that's death by trauma through tidal wave. That's.
But, again, I mean, yeah.
Is that a milk overdose?
Exactly.
Is that what that is?
Well, no, they had I've heard, you've seen news stories. There was one, it was a radio station.
Oh, I know.
Killed a lady with water.
Yep, because they thought that was going to be safe.
Right, and what it was don't go wee for a wee. That was the promotion. And what they had to do was who could drink the most water without peeing.
And they want a Nintendo
And they
Wii.
want a Wii.
A Nintendo Wii?
Yeah, so don't go wee for a Wii.
Did she win the Wii at least?
Yeah, she did win, but
Okay.
it killed her.
Yeah, it's called hypernatremia.
Yeah, she drank so much water, she thinned her blood out to the point that it couldn't support life. But again, they went with it because it's water. Water can't hurt you. Apparently they've never heard of drowning, but, you're just drinking water.
Yeah.
Anything. Oxygen. Gonna call out another blogger here.
Okay.
The Food Babe.
Jeez.
Right. She put out an article talking about how airlines
Oh, yes.
were being cheap and only putting air in the airplanes. There was only 21% oxygen in that.
Yeah. Oh, my goodness.
And so they did this to save money so they didn't have to buy 100% oxygen. Basically, they were cutting your oxygen down to 21% of normal. Problem with this theory is 21% is normal.
Yeah. That's what
Air
you're
you
breathing.
breathe every day is 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen, and then a certain whatever the balance is, of other things in the air.
So unless you are on oxygen right now as you're listening to this podcast, you are currently breathing that mixture.
Right. And you're only using 5% of that.
Quite frankly, it's because the world is cheap.
Right.
And they're cutting our oxygen supply.
And so, it's... I have nothing else to follow it up.
Nah, that's good. But
I get frustrated, so...
Yeah. Minor digression there, but you guys get the point. So codeine, for that reason though, because codeine can be abused, it's actually been, in the US and the UK, it's been a controlled substance since the 50s.
Right.
Where it wasn't a controlled substance was Russia.
Right.
And that wasn't until 2012, and that was because people were using it to make crocodile. Now, if you listen to one of our other podcasts, our first, part one.
Street Drugs 1.
Yeah, Street Drugs 1, we talk about crocodile. And what crocodile is that when it's typically used by people who are heroin addicts, but they can no longer afford heroin. And crocodile is basically a refinement process of codeine, which in Russia up until 2012.
I don't think we can call that a refinement.
Okay, true.
A treatment of codeine.
Yeah, there you go. That's even better. It is a treatment of codeine, which up until 2012 was available over the counter in Russia.
You could walk into your local grocery store or your local corner pharmacy and buy codeine tablets over the counter.
And they treat it with all sorts of crazy crap, like the red sulfur from match heads.
Right.
That goes in there. Brake cleaner.
Yeah.
Just ridiculous
Clean,
stuff like that.
Stuff like that.
Yeah, and then they take that and they inject it. And because it is from the same family as heroin, it gives them a very similar high. However, because it is codeine, the high does not last as long, and it's not quite as much. So they have to do more, and they have to do it more frequently.
Whereas they would do once, maybe twice a day of heroin,
Yeah.
they would do this up to 4, 5, and 6 times a day.
And the side effects of extravasiating, which means you miss a vein, of crocodile is far worse than the side effects of heroin.
Well, the name crocodile is because it makes you look like skin of a crocodile.
Yeah, it literally blisters the skin, making it look like scales, and it causes gangrene, which is essentially dead flesh.
If you want to be disgusted thoroughly, Google crocodile with a K, K-R-O-K-D-I-L.
Yep.
K-R-O-K-O-D-I-L. But anyway, Google will fix it for you if you spell it wrong.
Right.
And there's literally pictures on there of people's limbs where that's sloughed off and you can see bone.
And just as in our street drugs episode, we will not recommend eating in and around the time that you look this up.
Yeah, and the thing is don't look it up if you have a weak stomach in any way, shape, or form. It is disgusting.
And Mark has a serious face on while he's saying that, just so you know. That's the serious face.
I'm wearing my dad hat.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, don't look that up.
Yeah, don't look it up unless you have a fairly morbid personality.
Yeah. However,
needless to say, Chris and I both looked it up. So,
alrighty. So, codeine, it is considered less addictive than morphine, so it is preferred for more longer-term pain treatments. For example, if you have, like we talked about, if you recently coming off of a surgery where you might have some expected pain at the surgical site, that's where you're going to see codeine more likely to be prescribed for pain control.
You would expect.
Yeah.
We'll get into that in just a little bit.
Yeah, yes.
So much to unpack there, so.
Yeah. Oh, nice constipation reference.
Yeah.
Oh, no, you said unpack, didn't you?
Yes.
I thought you said impact.
Well, you unpack an impaction.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
All right, yeah. Mark and I are currently giving each other that's right. Nod.
Yeah, that's right. We know exactly what we're talking about.
Not making it up as we go along at all.
No.
All right, so heroin. We've already touched on heroin a little bit. This one is not used for anything medical whatsoever. It's a Schedule I drug. It has no medical use and currently has too many negatives to be anything but Schedule I. It's similar to morphine, but 2 to 3 times stronger per equivalent, so milligram per milligram. It's no longer used medically, and it's most commonly abused opiate in the U.S. and the U.K. We saw a resurgence here in heroin use as methamphetamines became more expensive to make here locally in Oregon. And then finally, let's move on to fentanyl. So fentanyl is synthetic. So it's actually not derived from the poppy plant itself. It's produced entirely in a lab. It's used both for long-term and acute pain. We use it on the ambulance, as we already mentioned, for acute pain.
Well, we went to fentanyl because morphine has a long onset of action.
Yeah.
Meaning that we were giving it every 3 to 5 minutes.
But it could take up to 10 to 20 for the first dose to get its full effect.
Right. So basically, when we got to the hospital, they felt great.
Yes.
But most of the trip, they were still in a lot of pain.
And unfortunately, an assessment of pain for the physician at the hospital is part of the assessment.
Right.
And so we'd bring him somebody that was like, okay, you're at a tolerable pain level now, but then 10 minutes, 20 minutes after dropping them off at the hospital, they're in la-la land.
Right.
So fentanyl is a good example, and the reason I chose fentanyl to talk about, it's a good example of why we make synthetic drugs in the first place. So fentanyl, you actually have several types of opioid receptors. I'm not going to go into all of those, but they all have different effects. Fentanyl is scientifically tailored to only impact certain ones that have the analgesic effect. Now, it still does have some side effects. Most medications, all medications do, but fentanyl has a reduced impact on the blood pressure, so the vasodilation effect is less. It has a reduced impact on gastric motility, so constipation occurs less. It has a really quick onset, which is what Mark was talking about, and it also a shorter duration. So it's really the ideal EMS pain drug. You give it, it comes on fast, and then it tapers off quickly.
Well, the little 6-year-old girl that dislocated her elbow today.
Yeah, came on quick.
So legitimately, by the time we were getting in the ambulance, she was starting to feel the effects of it, and her pain was going down. Right.
And so you do see this drug used for long-term pain control in the form of a patch. So fentanyl patches are fairly common, and it's like a Nicotrol patch or a birth control patch. It's a patch, a sticker really, that you stick on your skin, and it absorbs through the skin itself.
But fentanyl, being an opioid,
yeah,
high chance for addiction.
Absolutely.
I have known at least one patient who would take the pod out of the fentanyl patch, melt it down, and inject it.
That was actually a problem in one of the nearby counties for a while.
And he said it gave a better high. for a longer period of time than other narcotics.
And it can also be outright lethal.
Right.
That's
Oh, absolutely. This is a medication where morphine and codeine and heroin even are given in milligrams.
Yep.
Which are 1/1000th of a gram.
Right.
Fentanyl is given in micrograms.
Which is 1/1000th of a milligram.
Right.
1/1000th.
1/1000th of a milligram. You're welcome. And so, this is a very potent drug.
Right.
You know, that we give in very small doses, but it comes on quickly. And then it's nice because, well, it's not nice, but we get to the hospital, it wears off quickly. The doctors can do a proper assessment of the pain of the patient, and then they can give them much better, longer acting pain medications like Dilaudid.
Yeah.
Which is very, whereas you're giving upwards of 20 milligrams of morphine, you're giving half a milligram of Dilaudid.
Right.
But it's got the advantages of lasting for a much longer period of time, unlike fentanyl.
Now, fentanyl does have one side effect that's fairly unique to it, and that is something called chest wall rigidity.
I think we're going to go with the rooster crowing.
Yes, patients have been known to wake up at 8 a.m. crowing out the window. I don't think that's an actual side effect. Mark may have made that up. He might.
Prove me wrong, Internet. Prove me wrong.
You asked for it then. When you get to deal with that shitstorm, that's yours. So chest wall rigidity. Now, this is different than respiratory depression. Though fentanyl can also cause respiratory depression, not as readily as, say, morphine, chest wall rigidity is different in the sense that what it does is your chest wall has muscles all over it, and these muscles help expand your chest when you take a breath in, and they relax to let your chest when you exhale. Well, chest wall rigidity basically causes these muscles to tense up and not relax. Basically, you can't move your chest wall. In other words, you can't take a breath. The problem with this is it's not responsive to something like Narcan, which should be a narcotics antagonist.
Right.
And pretty much the only solution when this happens is to give a drug called succinylcholine. What succinylcholine does is it's a paralytic. And basically it blocks the neuromuscular junction, which is the junction between a nerve and a muscle, from functioning and causes muscles to relax. However, we then have to breathe for them after that by intubating the patient, hooking up a bag and squeezing it, or a ventilator in the hospital setting.
Would you say that's a conjunction function?
I wouldn't, but, sounds like you would. So the only time that I have ever heard, it's a very rare side effect, the only time that I've ever heard of it happening, one of my early jobs as a paramedic was I worked on a pediatric transport team. And all we did was transport sick kids, which, by the way, is a rough job. And there was an incident where a child was given a large dose of fentanyl that might have been more suitable for an adult. And that caused chest wall rigidity. Yeah.
Not going to come off looking good on the IR on that one.
Yeah, no, but it didn't result in the death of the child or anything. They recognized it quickly, acted appropriately. But that is the one case that I've actually seen it happen. So that is a negative side effect that's unique to fentanyl.
So one thing I was going to touch on is human beings have an incredible ability for inquisition. I'm not talking about the Spanish Inquisition. I'm talking about... Right. You weren't expecting that, were you?
You never expect a Spanish Inquisition.
So, we always can do something better. But do we need to?
Right.
One of the examples for me, is going to be carfentanil.
Okay.
Carfentanil is...
Fentanyl for cars.
It is.
Sorry.
is an analog of fentanyl.
Okay.
So fentanyl, extremely potent.
Yes.
Right? So somebody goes, hold my beer.
Yeah.
Right? So two chemists were standing there,
Oh, you think that's good?
Right. Let me this is the one I use in my car. So carfentanil is an analog of fentanyl. So fentanyl is given in micrograms, which is 1/1000th of a milligram.
Right.
Carfentanil is 100 times as potent as fentanyl.
Why? That is a bored chemist, by the way.
Yeah, hold my beer.
Yeah.
So...
It's the Walter White of opioids.
It is 5,000 times more potent than a unit of heroin.
Yes.
And 10,000 times more potent than a unit of morphine.
So they could have basically got Mount St. Helens to stop by dropping some in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, one of the reasons I bring this up is it does have some uses. None of them are great, but it does have some uses. I don't know if you remember talking or hearing about a Moscow theater in 2002 that was a hostage situation.
Okay.
And one of so the Russians went in and they disabled everybody in the building. And they never really told anybody how they did it. So it eventually came out as they used an aerosolized mist of carfentanil and remifentanil, which I haven't even looked up, to basically misted it into this building, and it knocked everybody out. Great.
That's actually pretty smart.
Except, they didn't tell anybody how they did it. So the first responders walk into all these people who are unconscious, and they don't know why.
Oh, damn.
Plus, they weren't told to bring opioid antagonists like Narcan, so they didn't have enough.
Oh, jeez.
And so, not knowing to expect hundreds of patients exposed to high doses of strong opioids, they didn't bring enough Narcan to counteract all this stuff, and 125 people exposed to this died.
Whoops.
Yeah. So you saved a bunch of lives by knocking everybody out, but then you killed them afterwards because you didn't tell the people who were there to fix them, or people that were there to help them, would be a better way to put that, how to help them, and so they didn't have enough of the drug on scene.
And quite frankly, what kind of dangerous scene is that to walk into?
Right.
Because those first responders are in there breathing the same air.
Right.
So who knows?
Or if it's misted onto a surface,
mm-hmm.
and that surface is now damp, and you touch it with a part of your body, you lean up against it, or you're changing gloves and you touch something and you start absorbing it through your skin, because there have been situations where that has happened, they feel.
Yeah.
Just recently, it was on the coast, I believe in Oregon.
Wow.
That first, a deputy started having hallucinations and side effects after touching a person who had been poisoned with carfentanil.
At least that's his excuse, as he raids the evidence locker.
No,
I'm joking. I don't want to talk ill about cops.
No, not at all.
We rely way too much on cops in our profession.
Exactly. Well, you're not going to anymore, apparently.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh, that's right. I'm one of the 1,000 people who have downloaded your podcast. I think you should go in first, Mr. Fingston.
But, this is probably a good time to bring up the opioid epidemic that's been hitting the news so much.
Well, it is, because these things work well.
Mm-hmm. And so one of the things that we're facing in the United States, and actually it's worldwide, but in the United States, it's been hitting the news quite a bit. The president's addressed it. It's been, there's been a couple of YouTube videos out there where people have recorded people in their car with their kids that are passed out from opioid addiction, and first responders responding to that. So what's been going on, because opioids are, in the grand scheme of things, not hard to get a hold of, because they're everywhere. They have legitimate medical usage. We see people who are, coming home from surgeries or injuries who otherwise don't have an addiction, are prescribed opiate-based painkillers, are now becoming addicted.
Right. Well, because, again, you take them while you're hurting. When you come off of them,
you're still addicted.
You're addicted. Well, when you start coming off of them, you feel like you're hurting.
Yeah.
Because your sense of pain is so skewed, because you're used to having this thing depressing your sense of pain, that now everything seems like it's painful. So then you need more opioids.
Well, and I have said this for a long time, heroin addicts are the biggest sissies when it comes to IVs.
Right.
Yeah, well, they are. I mean, because they come in, because one, a lot of times we end up going on heroin addicts who are withdrawing, and that generates the 911 call in the first place.
Right.
And so then we arrive, and they have symptoms that warrant an IV.
Right.
And so you go to start an IV on them. For one, not a lot of sites.
Right.
Because they've used up all their good veins anyway. And two, they're going through withdrawals. They feel like they're hurting anyway.
Any sort of touch, much less a sharp object in their arm.
Yeah, and they scream,
right.
What are you doing to me? So what you end up having is, because opioids are so well saturated in the medical field, people who would otherwise not have an exposure to drugs are now being exposed.
Right.
And with this high level of exposure, you're creating a large, I guess you could say these painkillers are a gateway drug.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have a large base of people that now have access to pain pills. And the other problem too is it's really difficult for physicians right now. They're in a weird position. There's a lot of heat in the media and the press for physicians to stop prescribing opioids.
Right.
But at the same time, physicians get a lot of pressure in terms of litigation,
right,
for not treating patients' pain,
or even just in the room, in the office.
Yeah,
it's the only thing that works for my pain.
Absolutely.
I mean, you and I have both probably run on these patients that will have a long list of allergies, except for the pain medication they like.
Yeah. When in reality, most of these medications are really, really, really similar to the one that they like. Right. And it would be very difficult to be allergic to one but not the other.
Right. And, but that's the one that works the best for them. Mm-hmm. And so that's the one they want.
And that's the one they're addicted to.
Right. And so they're in the office and they're crying, angry, whatever, with the doctor because he's withholding this from them.
Yeah.
So then they go doctor shopping.
Absolutely.
Or what we see, hospital shopping.
All the time.
Where they call up and they go to this one hospital that they've gone to all their life, and the doctors there have now determined that the person's addicted, and they're not going to feed into that addiction.
They'll get flagged in their system, actually.
Right. And so they try and give them non-narcotic pain relievers.
Well, that doesn't do what they want.
No, because they're not wanting the pain relief.
They want the narcotic high.
They want the narcotic high. So then they'll go to a different hospital until the doctors there figure out.
Yeah. And
then they'll go to a different hospital. They keep moving to these different hospitals until they run out of hospitals.
Now, to show you how extreme this addiction gets, and Mark and I, in our area recently, there was a kid, I think he was technically 18, but I'd call him a kid now, who knew how to dislocate his shoulder.
I never ran on this guy.
Oh, you didn't? Yeah. He ended up moving to a nearby county.
Right.
So he's out of our hair now, or at least that's where he's going now.
Right.
What he would do is he'd go to skate parks, and he would dislocate his shoulder and call 911.
Wow.
And he would sit there, and of course you'd give a dislocated fentanyl. Of course you would.
Well, and the thing is that with the way shifts work and shift rotations work, chance of you getting the same medic twice.
Yeah,
fairly slim. And if I come across somebody at a skate park that's legitimately dislocated their shoulder, like you said, yeah, I'm going to give pain meds.
It looks painful.
Yeah, I'm here to help.
But yeah,
I want to help you with this pain. I have a medication that can help you with that. And if I don't know the history, then I'm going to give you the pain meds. I had a lady who, on the other end of the spectrum, fire when I walk in. Our local fire responders, all good guys, but they're trying to help her out. She's dislocated her shoulder. Mm-hmm. And they're like, well, we'll give you some fentanyl. No. What? You're in 10 out of 10 pain. And I was looking at her, I go, are you on a pain contract? Which is something that if you're determined to be abusing these medications, but you still need them, you can go on a pain contract, which is something you sign with a doctor, and your pain medications are highly regulated, and you will not get any more than what's prescribed to you.
Yeah.
You can't come back in, get 10-day supply and come back in 7 days and say, look, I ran out or I lost them. Well, no, you got a 10-day supply. And it's an attempt to help regulate and help bring people back from that edge of addiction. Mm-hmm. And she said, no, I'm not in a pain contract. I'm a recovering addict.
Oh.
So she was, and to opiates.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
She's not going to take fentanyl because she's scared about going back down that path.
Good for her, though.
Absolutely good for her.
Willpower.
So we carry a different medication called ketamine. And I offered that to her because she was in a lot of pain. She wanted something for pain,
Just not an opioid.
Just not an opioid. And so we had to call our online medical control. Mm-hmm. And I got permission to skip the fentanyl. And the doc's like, yeah, absolutely. He was a little confused about why I was calling. And I was like, well, technically I have to give the fentanyl first. I'm pretty sure even if I didn't talk to you and I did this, I wouldn't catch any grief.
Right.
But this is the protocol that if I'm going to take this kind of a deviation, I have to get approval from a doctor.
It's out of the norm.
Right.
Yeah.
So we skipped straight to ketamine.
How'd it go?
Really well. Helped with her pain. She was able to get up and walk down to the gurney and relatively comfortable ride all the way to the hospital.
But good for her, though.
But then we had to make sure we read, because as soon well, do you want anything for pain? She's like, no. I'm like, wait just a second. You have to be a little more open about this because this sends up red flags.
And here's the thing. As paramedics, We see a lot, and I think a lot of people don't want to share these things because they don't want to be judged.
Right.
We see a lot. The chances of you being the worst, pretty slim.
Right.
Pretty slim.
Yeah.
If your paramedics know what they're doing, they're not going to judge you.
Right.
And by the way, any paramedics listening that judge, stop.
Right. You haven't walked this person's life. You don't know their path.
Yeah. Just take care of them.
Be a good human being.
Yeah.
So anyway, Narcan.
So that's one of the recent controversies that has come up. So with this opioid epidemic that we're seeing, because it does kill people,
Yeah.
one of the solutions that some communities have taken and that some people are advocating for is to make a drug called Narcan, also known as, it's called naloxone, also known as Narcan, or a narcotics antagonist, and make it available. And what this does is it flushes the opioid receptors in your body, it flushes them out, and stops the effect of the opioids.
It competes with the opiates for those receptors.
Yeah, and it competes really, really good.
Now, there's some drawbacks to that.
There's several different drawbacks. So when you give this, it can bring somebody essentially back from the dead.
Right.
If you've ever seen the movie Bringing Out the Dead,
right,
it has a great depiction in there.
Right.
They have, I believe the character's name is Ivy Bangin', and he's overdosed, and Nicolas Cage gives him Narcan. It works rapidly, and the guy goes from blue and apneic meaning not breathing, to awake and breathing. One thing the movie skips is it's usually awake, breathing, and vomiting.
Or awake, breathing, and angry.
Yeah, it does.
Because you are essentially, and this is one of the drawbacks, is if you use it too aggressively, you can actually send them into withdrawals.
Right. So, like, for example, our dosage, if we're giving it IM, which means intramuscular, it's just a needle in the arm, and we push that, we give it 2 milligrams. If we're giving it intravenously, it's a 0.5 milligram for a loading dose. Now, we can step up additional dosages as needed.
Right.
But the general goal for me as a paramedic is I want to give them just enough Narcan that they are breathing on their own and that they're oxygenating their blood.
Right.
That's going to save them from death.
Well, and the thing is that may seem a little bit harsh, that we don't want to bring them fully awake. Mm-hmm. But a lot of times, like we said, when they come fully awake, they're upset with you because you just killed their high and they pay good money for it. Yeah,
and the other thing, too, is not bringing them fully, that's no detriment to them.
Right.
They're sleeping through this.
But the thing is that if they come up and they're angry, and now you have to fight them all the way to the hospital.
Oh, yeah, and that's dangerous for me.
And that's dangerous for you, it's dangerous for them, it's dangerous for everybody on the road. Mm-hmm. So if we can bring them up to a point where they're sustaining life healthily.
Yeah.
Well, as healthy as you can be as an addict, but, you're sustaining life, but you're not causing this other stuff to go on, the anger, the fighting, whatever, the vomiting.
Yeah.
And when you say vomiting, this isn't just like
oh boy,
I got a little bit in the back of my throat. This is, you're going for distance.
Oh yeah.
Kind of vomiting.
The best, I had a recent one where we gave Narcan. The guy woke up and he started vomiting before he was really cognizant. Mm-hmm. And so he basically just put his face towards the ground, and his face was maybe 3 inches above the ground, and he started hurling right at it. And if you've ever seen a welder weld, and you've seen where the spark's hitting, and there's the sparks just hitting a surface, and it's just flying off everywhere, it looks like he was welding with vomit.
Right.
And it's just vomit going everywhere, to the point that I'm taking a step back, because I don't want to get it on me.
Right.
He ended up being A-okay. But anyway,
so these are people that are on the gurney in the ambulance, and they can make it out the back door.
Yeah.
And not a drop that lands inside your ambulance.
We try to keep the back door closed, by the way.
Right. Well, this is still on scene, sitting still. But that's just the kind of vomiting. When we say projectile vomiting, this is the kind of vomiting that can actually do damage.
Yeah. This is exorcist-style stuff.
Yeah. They could actually cause bleeding in their esophagus because they're vomiting so hard.
Yeah. It's a substantial amount. So one of the solutions to this opioid epidemic, or I guess not a solution, but possibly a Band-Aid in the meantime, keep people from dying, is to distribute Narcan freely. So in other words, one way is getting a prescription for Narcan. Mm-hmm. I've seen that. And the other way is Narcan dispensaries, essentially free Narcan.
Reminiscent of the needle dispensaries.
Yeah.
And at the peak of the heroin crisis.
Fun fact.
Okay.
During my research for this, it was actually morphine and the administration of morphine that spurred the motivation for the modern hypodermic needle.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the hypodermic needle design. Now, hypodermic needle has actually been around for a long time.
Right.
But the design that we use today of it being a beveled edge, metal edge with a hollow barrel, that was designed so that morphine could be administered in a more controlled manner.
I thought you were going to go with the fact that one of the initial perceived benefits of heroin, was that you didn't have to inject it.
Oh, no.
That was one of the things that initially they're like, well, this is great. Smaller dosage, plus we don't have to have a needle.
Yeah. But no, actually, yeah, it was the administration of morphine that really ushered us into the modern hypodermic needle design.
Really pushed the needle forth.
Yeah.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Anyway, back to Narcan.
Right.
So there's pros and cons to this. The pro is that it can save lives.
Right.
The problem with people who find themselves in situations where they're doing a lot of heroin or a lot of opiates that have these overdoses is that they're not fond of calling 911.
Right.
Because often with paramedics comes police.
Right.
And having a bunch of heroin around you when the cops show up isn't a good thing. So they won't call 911, increasing their chance of death. If Narcan is available to them, the idea is that it will increase their chance of living through this. They don't have to call 911. They can administer the Narcan and be on their merry way. The cons on this pro and con list is, well, for one, Narcan can be administered and then Narcan can wear off, the same as any other medication.
About 10 or 15 minutes, isn't it?
Yeah. So if you have a substantial enough dose of opioid on board and you give Narcan, yeah, they come back out of it. It's like, oh, great, everything's good. Well, hey, buddy, you're fine. I'm going to go ahead and leave. And you leave. Narcan wears off.
It doesn't cleanse the blood of the drug.
No, it just...
It goes in and sits on those receptors so that the drugs that are in your blood can't affect your brain.
Right. It still has to be metabolized and basically go through your kidneys to get out of your body.
Right. So if you have so much in there that your body doesn't have enough time to metabolize it out before the Narcan wears off, you're back in the same spot.
Absolutely. And so this can, versus if you called 911, you'll be transported.
Right.
So if this happens, you can be redosed. And I've taken patients to the hospital. By the time getting to the hospital, they're back to falling asleep.
Right.
Oxygen saturations are going down.
Oh, yeah.
Those things again. And that's happened.
Right.
So this is a real problem with it. The other side of it, of course, is the law enforcement side of it. If people aren't calling 911, then law enforcement is less aware of where the heroin or the source of prescription narcotics is coming from because they don't know it ever happened in the first place.
Right.
So those are kind of those are the pros and cons of Narcan distribution. That's where I'm at.
Is it going to save lives? In the short term. But the thing is you can't use it as a substitute for being monitored until the narcotic is worn off.
Right.
It's not a fix. It is a Band-Aid. This is the finger in the dam.
Yeah.
It's not going to stop the problem. It's going to just slow it down.
So this leads to other controversies. For example, then, if we don't want to do that, then how do we make it to where people in this situation are more apt to call 911?
Right.
And so one idea is to decriminalize possession.
Right.
And only criminalize distribution.
Right.
That's one idea. Other ideas are to decriminalize drug use, period.
Right.
So.
That's kind of my position. Decriminalize it, regulate it, tax it. Because, one of the problems with, if you're not talking about, we're talking about unregulated like heroin.
Right.
You never know. We talked about this in the heroin on the street drugs episode. You never know how strong it's going to be until you take it.
That's true.
That's which true. Is not a good time to figure out how strong it is.
Yeah, sure, half that dose.
But when you're talking about prescription drugs, at least it's regulated.
It's true.
People know how much. If I take a tablet if I put a patch on that's 75 micrograms per day, or per, whatever it is for the patch, that's how much I'm going to get. Now, if I decide to put 5 patches on, that's a different story.
Kind of your fault, really.
Yeah, but if I'm taking, Roxanol is a form of morphine. A liquid form of morphine.
Yep.
I ran a call. This very nice elderly gentleman was very concerned because he couldn't wake his wife up.
Uh-oh.
Right? So we got there. I'm like, okay, and she's deeply sedated. She will come up with a good noxious stimuli. But then she goes immediately back down. So I'm start talking to him. My partner's getting a blood pressure. We're getting an IV started, everything like that. He goes, well, she started taking this. He hands me this bottle of something. And I look at it. I'm like, oh, okay, it's Roxanol. So standard concentration of Roxanol is what?
I don't know.
20 milligrams of morphine per milliliter.
That's
a stout.
For reference, in the EMS field, when that drug, when morphine was given IV, we were giving 2 to 5 milligrams per dose to a max of 20.
Right. She has a full cough syrup bottle full of this stuff at 20 milligrams per milliliter.
A milliliter is tiny, by the way.
It is not a whole bunch there. She was prescribed...
Really quick, for reference, a saline bag, a typical saline bag you see in the hospital, the long types, if you've ever seen one, 1 milliliter is 1/1000th of that bag.
You're having a problem with that word.
I am.
1/1000th.
Thanks, Mark.
Yeah, not a problem.
I'm just going to point to you when I have to say
there
that.
You go.
You have to follow me around.
So yeah, that's 1,000 cc's or 1,000 milliliters. So she was prescribed 2 to 3 milliliters every 6 hours for pain.
Was she end of life care?
No.
I mean, she is now, but
no.
Sorry, I shouldn't.
No, and this is now like 3 days into it.
Yeah.
Okay, so and he was very concerned, rightly so, but I looked at him, I read that, I go, well, I know what the problem is. I mean, he was thinking stroke. He was thinking,
Sure.
he went to all the really dark places that you would go to naturally. And I go, well, I know the problem.
Yeah.
And he was like, what is this? That is, and this woman is your little grandma.
Oh, jeez.
Maybe 110 pounds.
Oh, my.
You know, and she's been taking this. So what happens is, especially when you're elderly, is you can't metabolize these medications as quickly. And so she keeps redosing per the prescription on the bottle.
Yeah.
And there's still plenty, and so it builds up. So now instead of taking she was taking 40 to 60 milligrams every 6 hours for 3 days. And so I was like, okay, so we got her loaded up, and we gave her a little bit of Narcan, and she came around, and she was talking to her husband, and then on the way to the hospital, she started going back down again.
Yeah.
And so, give her a little bit more. We get to the hospital, and basically she had to sit there and come off of morphine until she could stay awake.
That's one where the lab sends the blood back saying, you just sent me a vial of morphine.
Right.
That's all you sent me.
It's red. I don't know why this vial of morphine's red.
But that's all the spectrometer shows.
So, now, okay, the thing about Narcan, let's finish up on that. Yes, it's beneficial in the short term. It does not replace constant monitoring.
Yeah.
So if you're in a position where you need to give Narcan to somebody because you feel they've had an overdose, do not let that stop you from calling 911.
Get us there.
Get us there. Because even if we get there and the person refuses, or they get upset because you called 911, so now the police are there, there's a distinct possibility they're going to be back in the same position if they're not given long-term treatment for this.
And here's the thing this might be a hard concept to swallow for some, but one of the things that even if you have a friend, or even if you have a heroin problem, or you have an opiate problem,
right?
One of the things that we're going to agree on here is that it is a problem.
Yeah.
And sometimes people have to reach a rock bottom before they see it.
They have to have that moment of, I'm either going to change my path, or I'm going to keep doing this till it kills me. Yeah.
And so sometimes an interaction with the police is that rock bottom.
Yeah. Or the fact that we had to be called. That's sometimes the thing that looks them in the face and goes, okay, I'm there. I have to either change my behavior or this is going to kill me.
Well, I'll tell you, that guy I told you about who was welding the ground with vomit.
Mm-hmm.
One of the statements he made on the way to the hospital is he starts getting really emotional.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes Narcan can actually make you emotional as well. So I'm thinking it's the Narcan. And I was like, I was trying to be comforting, trying to be nice. And one of the things he tells me, he goes, no. He goes, I'm going to lose my kid.
Yeah.
He's in a custody battle.
Yeah.
And so he is, he's convinced he's going to lose his kid because...
if they pull this chart...
yeah.
And they present it in court in a child custody hearing that he was taken to the hospital for an overdose of narcotics.
Right. Well, when we got on scene, actually, he was actually at his mother's house.
Mm-hmm.
And she was holding the kid. And when we got there, she kept telling us, go, pick him up, go. What are you doing here? Why are you still here? And I'm like, ma'am, we need to save him. You need to back away and let us do this. No, you guys need to take him to the hospital. She's worried the cops were going to come.
Right. And then there's a police report.
And the moment the cops come into the house, when they have probable cause to enter the house because it's a possible overdose, and they see something,
And there's a child.
that's it. Game over. So she wanted us out. So the fire lieutenant, to this day, he's one of my favorite fire lieutenants, masterfully took her aside and was like, look, here's the thing. This came in as an unconscious unresponsive. I have not heard of a cop car coming.
Right.
You gotta let us do what we gotta do.
Right.
If we left now for the hospital, he wouldn't make it from here to the hospital.
Right.
That might have been a lie, but whatever.
You don't know. I mean, if he's that far down, we're not going to take the chance.
No, we're not. We're not. And that's, and I've talked about this a couple other times. That is one of the changing things about the field of paramedics is that a lot of people are used to the olden days of load them in the Cadillac, drive to the hospital as fast as you can, and that's the only goal. We do a lot of stuff now.
Right.
And sometimes we take a little bit of time on scene.
Right.
My personal style, I transport probably quicker, I think, than most paramedics do.
Yeah.
And I do a lot of it in the back of the ambulance. And I actually learned that from you when you and I worked together.
Because I'm great.
Yeah. Mark was actually one of my earlier paramedic partners. Not my earliest, but one of my earlier. And I do a lot of the things.
Your paramedic partner complaint. We can't put those in the same scale. The previous partner.
I had a few previous partners that were, how about this? They're no longer paramedics. Neither of them actually are. But yeah, it's one of those things where, as I've become a paramedic, there are some things that I used to not understand why Mark did. That now I'm like, oh yeah, I totally know why he does that.
In our system, we have what's called a lead or a senior paramedic and then a junior paramedic.
Yeah.
I was a senior, and I tend to want to do things a specific way.
Yes.
And I have reasons.
Right.
I do have my reasons. And it took Chris becoming a senior paramedic to go, oh.
Yeah.
Okay, I see where he's going with that.
This
now.
makes sense.
Yeah.
You know what, though? That wraps up what I want to say about opium. How about you?
Yeah. Narcan, if you have somebody who has an opioid problem or an opiate problem, we're not saying don't get it. Absolutely get the prescription. It could save their life.
But get us there, too.
Get us there, too, because it's not a fix. It is a Band-Aid.
And there is no amount of, legal consequence that's worth their life.
Right. And again, this could be that hallmark moment in their life where they decide to change.
Yeah.
Even if it's the 15th or 20th time it's gone on.
Could be the best thing you do for them.
Yeah.
They may not see that.
Other than the fact that they aren't dead.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah, they may not see that. So, Anyway, that's it.
Now, check us out on Facebook. Medical Stuff.
Medical Stuff is on Facebook. We're on the tweets.
Check us out on
Medical Stuff or at Medside Stuff for Twitter. MEDSIDESTUFF.
You can email us at medsidestuff@yahoo.com.
How do you spell it?
MEDSIDESTUFF.
Nice.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we're on YouTube.
Yeah, that's going to be Medical Stuff Videos is the channel. Check us out there.
And right now, we haven't actually posted any videos, but we're going to in the future.
Yeah, we do have our episodes are being uploaded.
Right.
So if you like to use YouTube to stream to your car, that's what I do.
Yeah.
It's an easy way to listen. Also, see us on, you can find us on iTunes and Google Play.
And Stitcher.
Or
go straight to our Podiant page, Medical Stuff, at Podiant. Let's see, it's...
No, just go to Podiant and look for
www.medicalstuff.podiant.co.
Yeah. And please, on iTunes and Google Play and YouTube, please leave a review or a thumbs up.
And subscribe.
Yes. Please subscribe to YouTube.
5-star reviews are always appreciated because it helps move us up the lists so more people can hear from us. So, I think we're good.
I'm good.
Toast.
Never going to explain that.
Nope.
Don't even ask us.
We're not sure where it comes from.